Yes, to see. My name is Maria Eisnagel. I serve as the secretary for Prescott Audubon Society and would like to welcome you all to our presentation this evening. Just a couple of housekeeping notes, and then we have two quick announcements from others before we introduce the speaker for the evening. First of all, the exits, so you're aware, there's an exit here and an exit there just for safety. The restrooms are located through the back in that doorway below the other exit sign. Please help yourself to refreshments as the evening goes along. Another quick mention is that if you are new to Prescott Audubon Society, welcome. And if you would like to renew your membership or to become a member for the first time, Sandy and Joe at the table in the back will be happy to assist you with that. So without further ado, I want to turn it over to Paul to do a quick introduction to our Zoom feature for the evening.
Good evening. I just wanted to let everybody know here, you're going to see a little extra green and red at the top. Many of you have been in Zoom sessions for the last almost 3 years, probably recognize it. We are trying to, we have about 8 or 9 people on watching, which is outstanding. And I'm also recording. And sometime next week, I get to figure out where I'm going to put it on YouTube. And we'll put the information out like we do in all our evenings. But don't be too concerned if it changes, okay? And to keep saying I'm Sandy Kominkowski Bell. No, she's much better looking than I am.
Thank you, Paul. Now Eric Moore has an announcement for us.
Wow. Well, this is a little self-serving, but I want to announce. Hi. Jay's Bird Barn is hosting our 19th anniversary celebration this Saturday. It's open to the public. For 19 years, except for the last 2 years, we hope that we kind of a barbecue, free lunch for every community that comes. And this year, we're going to do a fundraiser for Brad Newman. You know Brad, executive director for Yavapai Exceptional Industries. He had a pretty severe stroke a couple months ago. We're trying to raise money to help with rehab as far as therapy. So we hope you'll join us. We're going to announce the winners of the annual Wild Bird Photo Contest at noon. Carl Tolmont and his wife Joan are going to come and do a book signing of their book, Woody Plants of the Woody Islands, at 11 to 12. And then at 1 o'clock, Yavapai Exceptional Industries has a group of adults with disabilities that do sign language. They're called the beautiful signers, not the singers. And they're going to come and they're going to perform at 1 o'clock. So we got them at 11, at 12, at 1. So we'd love to have you come and join us. Thank you very much. Oh, sorry. If you're interested in learning how to digiscope, which is digital photography through a scope, we're having 2 digiscoping workshops. One's tomorrow at 2 and one Saturday morning from 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. as part of our anniversary celebration. So Clay Taylor, the naturalist manager for Swarovski Optics in the whole world, he's here. He showed up today. And Clay is going to lead digiscoping workshops. So if you're interested in learning how to do digiscoping, you're going to learn from the expert. I mean, this guy's like the guy that invented it. So he's really amazing. See me if you have questions.
Very cool. Thank you, Eric. So without further ado, I would like to welcome Sharon Arnold, who will introduce our speaker for the evening.
I haven't been up here in a long time, so it's kind of fun to stand here and look at all these wonderful faces. And it's very exciting that we are able to Zoom this. And I think that's going to help a lot of people participate in the future that don't like to get out in the evening. I'm the conservation chair for Prescott Audubon, and we have a very, very special guest tonight. Our topic is conservation tonight, and it's about the water in our county. And Nancy Steele, executive director of the Friends of the Verde River, has come up from Kempery to share the information that was gathered for the Verde Watershed Conference that was held in September. Nancy has returned to her native Arizona. She was born in what all of us call the Valley of the Sun, Phoenix. And she's now leading the Friends of the Verde River. She has worked there since 2018, and they, in collaboration, that works for a healthy flowing river system. Nancy dedicated most of her career to river conservation and watershed health. In California, she founded a land trust, the Arroyos and Foothills Conservancy, and was the executive director of the Council for Watershed Health. Prior to working in nonprofit management, Nancy was a specialist in environmental policy in the California state government with a focus on reducing environmental hazards from lead, pollution, and toxic diesel emissions. Nancy is a board member of the Infrastructure Funding Alliance and co-owner of a family beekeeping business. She is a fellow of Arizona's Flynn Brown Civic Leadership Academy, a Durfee Foundation Stanton Fellow, and a Robert and Patricia Schweitzer Foundation Environmental Fellow. Nancy earned her doctorate in environmental science and engineering from UCLA. She received her science degree from Arizona State University and her bachelor's degree from Oxford College. So please welcome Nancy Steele.
Thank you, Sharon. It's nice to be in person, to talk with you all. I know some of the folks on Zoom. It's always great if that's an option. I spend most of my day on Zoom. Today is one of those days. And thanks, Sharon, for the introduction and for inviting me also. Regarding, you talked about my work history, I like to say I work from the brown side of the environment I moved over to the green side of the environment when I went from working to reduce hazards to working to save land and our rivers. And growing up in Phoenix, we traveled all over the state and all over the Southwest. My parents instilled in me a love of nature, and I always wanted to be a scientist. I have a science brain, but I ended up deciding not to get that kind of a degree and become a professor because I was really kind of impatient, and I could never settle down and decide what I wanted to do. So before I got my doctorate, I had worked in a number of different careers. And then I got my doctorate and worked for the California state government. And I never worked anywhere for more than 4 or 5 years. Even when I was with an agency for longer than that, I would move in between. And I really, my home, when I switched, as I said, from the brown side to the green side and started working with nonprofit organizations. I did one of those things where I left a really good, safe government job to go work for a nonprofit organization where you can hire the women of the organization and the board. But I've always loved it, never loved it. And, I don't miss the really great pension that I could have when I retired in the state government. I really don't miss it. So I wanted to talk to you today about Friends of the Verde River. And I want to also tell you just a little bit about I guess before I go to the next slide, a little bit about my background in birding and how I came to birds. When I was in college, one of my professors was a man named Dr. Luis Baptista. And he's someone that you wouldn't know if he had lived, because he died at a fairly young age of a heart attack, very tragic. I think he was in his 50s when he died. Luis Baptista was one of the pioneers in acoustic learning in birds. His bird was the white-crowned sparrow, his research subject, although of course he studied others, birds also. But Luis was a crazy biologist. He was enthusiastic, he would bounce around. We have these great photos of him with the great big huge headphones on and the great big parabolic microphone that he would go around and record birds. And he tried to imbue biology students that infectious love of birds, and it didn't stick. I got a bird book, I got a bird book anyway. And I didn't even really have any binoculars. I would borrow other people's binoculars, and I would mark when I saw things. I knew enough to mark and write it down. And I still have that book, and someday I will put that in the eBird someday when I'm retired and have nothing else to do, right? But so I would do that, and that went on for a long time. And then I, asked, Audubon Society in LA, I went on a bird walk with them. And I didn't know what it was to go on a bird walk. So they were all walking really slowly, and I was walking really fast in front of them. And I saw, hawk, and they're like way back there, and I scared all the birds away. So I never went on another bird walk because I was being really stupid. And I thought, well, I can't do that again. That's really embarrassing. So I kept sort of trying and failing. And I went on a Costa Rican trip, and I did under the love of my guides because I had a bird book that I bought in country. And anytime they would show us something, I would make them point it out to me in the book so that I could write it down, and then they would start showing me the birds in the scope. So that was nice. It wasn't until I came to Friends of the Verde River, though, that it really stuck. Friends of the Verde River puts on the Verde Valley Birding Nature Festival every April. And since 2018 is when the prior organization that ran it, Birdno, merged with Friends in 2017, and thus we got the festival. And so I decided that, although I was the executive director of the organization, I would pay for my bird trips, and I would attend 4 or 5 or 6 bird trips in the 4-day festival and have nothing else on my schedule because I wanted to learn. And I wanted to learn from the best people, the best guides I know that we bring in for that festival. So I started doing that and getting a little bit better. And then, darn it, if Louise Baptiste didn't come into my mind again, Dr. Baptiste didn't come into my mind again when Merlin released their sound idea. And all of a sudden that just opened up a whole world for me because I'm, old to learn things, right? I'm too old to learn new bird songs. But that app would tell me that something I was hearing was a bird. And then I was able to start learning bird songs. So that has been really revolutionary for me, and I'm sure it has been for millions of other people. But it made me think about Luis Baptista again, with his huge parabolic microphone and his great big headphones on, and all the work that people like him have done through the years to record bird song and then get into this great big huge citizen science project that is eBird and that is the Cornell bird biology lab, and make it so that all of us can enjoy birds. So I know I'm preaching to the choir because this is probably many of you have similar stories about how you came to birds, but I wanted to share that all with you, and especially give recognition to Dr. Baptista, who is the one who first tried to catch me as a birder, and it stuck eventually. It took that seed a long time to grow. So let me talk about the Verde birds. I'm supposed to point
this direction. Is it working?
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, I'll get you started.
Yeah, get me started and see what. Sometimes I go the wrong direction on these things. Okay, so Friends of the Verde River, tell you a bit about the organization. And then I want to use the example of what we're doing with the Verde to tell you what you can be doing also. And this is all couched in what we learned, and we put together a report card for the Verde and released it in 2020, which gave us the metrics that we can use, not just to track the status and trends for how the Verde is going, how it's doing, but also to tell us how we can solve the problems that are causing low scores. So we are a group of people, we've been together as a nonprofit organization for about 10 years. And we exist because we cannot imagine a world in which the Verde River is not healthy and flowing. It's still not working.
Okay, I'll
It
move.
was working before.
Yes,
So you guys all probably know what a watershed is? Yes?
Yeah.
And everybody on Zoom is shaking their heads. Yes. It's just the land over which, when water flows, it flows towards a body of water. A watershed is defined by the collection point. So the Verde River watershed is one of 10, the 10 large watersheds in Arizona, right there. And next slide.
okay,
Since it's not working, so there we go. It's right there, and the Verde is a tributary of the Salt. And the Salt and the Verde and the Gila and the Agua Fria all used to flow down to the Colorado River. So we are part of the Colorado River Basin, which is the larger watershed. Did I do that or did you?
I did. I did.
Okay, I'll point it at you.
Okay, there you go. That'll work.
So, okay, so this is the watershed that I showed you, that includes the upper, middle, and the lower Verde. 3 different parts of the Verde. It's got 13 cities. They are partially within the watershed. It crosses the boundaries of 4 counties, mostly Yavapai and Coconino, but down towards the southern end and around Hazen's, Gila, and here is Maricopa. And there are 4 national forests, 13 wilderness areas, and how many IBAs? I have a slide later. The highest point in the Verde is Humphreys, so you may not think that we go all the way up to Humphreys, but the watershed from the water from Humphreys and that Snowball area flows down to the Verde, and then this point is where it has its confluence with the Salt River near Scottsdale and Fountain Hills, or in Fountain Hills area. So it's also land that we have to acknowledge was occupied before Europeans came here, before we carved it up into our cities and towns. There have been people living here since time immemorial, and today there are native nations or tribes that have their home in the Verde. The Yavapai Prescott, Yavapai Apache, Tonto Apache, sort of this middle part in the middle area, the Wallapai Indian Nation, and to the south, Fort McDowell Yavapai and Salt River Pima Maricopa Indian community. I also want to acknowledge the Hopi and Zuni people who always used this land and have called it their home at various times, even though when it all shook out, they didn't have reservation land in the Verde.
Must be working that time.
Is it working now?
I guess.
Still,
Hang on.
somehow we got that. All right. So,
There you go.
so great. I pointed it too soon. So another thing that's important to know about the Verde, and I'll talk about this a little more later also, in the context of the Upper Verde, but the Verde has the only 2 designations of federally significant wild and scenic rivers in all of Arizona, which is kind of staggering to think that in all of Arizona, these are the only river segments that have been so designated. About 60 miles of river, Fossil Creek and the Lower Verde, as outlined in this slide. When we were working with the Forest Service on the report card, on the Verde Watershed report card, I said something about the river being important in Arizona. And I said that to the Forest Service folks, and I was quickly corrected. I said, no, this is a federally significant river. And we'd like to see that for the upper river. All right, so birds. We also, Verde is for the birds. It's one of the most significant places in North America for breeding bird densities. And from a book by Sandra Postel. And if you haven't read it, it's called Nourish? I think it's called Nourish. You had Kim Shonik come and talk earlier, and she is profiled a lot in the work that she and the Nature Conservancy has done, is profiled in that book a lot. All right, next.
I got it.
You got it. All right, so here's our important bird areas in the Verde watershed. We've got the Upper Verde, Watson Willow, the Tuesday Goose, I forget what this one is called, but it's the Oak Creek, maybe it's just called the Oak Creek. Camp Verde, I think is the newest one, Camp Verde IBA, they worked real hard on that. And then these down here in Agua Fria, which I forget what they're called. And then this one down here. So it's a pretty birdie area. Do you know them all by name? Okay, I don't remember them all by name, but it's a pretty birdie area when you think about it. And why is that?
Water.
Water. We've got flowing water here. My father used to tell me that, my father was in Arizona since high school. And when did he was born in 1928, I think he was born in 1928. Anyway, he was in Arizona since high school, and when I was a kid, he used to say Arizona used to be greener and wetter. And that was even before climate change sort of started accelerating the aridity. And he said, dads don't know anything. And I,
Dingus,
over time, I have thought about what he says, and I keep reevaluating.
Nutty.
And one of the things, sure, maybe it's about the cattle, but it's also about how we use the land itself and the acceleration of erosion, and which lowers water tables and over pumping of groundwater. And some of that might be cattle, but some of that also just might be poorly placed roads, improperly placed cattle tanks. And so all of that has served to help de-water this land and lower the water table. And there's things we can do about that too. So just quick birds, you guys all know these are all your friends, right? You do surveys for casinos. And you all know Southwest Willow Flycatcher. Yeah. Mexican spotted owl, I've not seen one yet, but they're up in Oak Creek and they're part of the watershed also. And then, we have to give, there's some plants, there's an endangered Arizona cliff rose, and we've got some threatened endangered reptiles also in the watershed, not to mention a fish, which somebody called me out and said, why don't you have the fish on the slide? So the Verde, along with, I just talked about the aridity in Arizona, the Verde is also drying out. And when we produce the watershed report, one of the things that one of the indicators, we're trying to think of what's our indicator for water supply.
Holy cow.
And we decided that our indicator for water supply was just going to be flow in the river at different points. And I'm just showing you the pollen gauge, but we also track other gauges in the Verde, in particular the pollen gauge and then the Camp Verde gauge also. But this is where the gauge is, and this is the flow trend since 1990. Apologies for not having that ticks along the bottom here, but about 34% decline since 1990. And this is a pretty tight line also, if you know anything about graphs and how we draw lines when we have graphs, there's statistics involved. But what I like to look at also is how much do those how big of a swing do we have around that line? So pretty tight fit. And that's, we believe that that's because this line is more reflective simply of rainfall into, or I should say, infiltration into and groundwater pumping out of the aquifer, and reflects the overdrafting that's happening in the little sheet of ice. So let's just quickly go through these slides. You know the story, you know the reason. Grounding, of course, growing populations only worsen the problems. And you're probably all really familiar with this graph. I would love to use a different one, or this graphic, but this is the one that's out in the literature of the Chino Basin and its impacts, where it sits, and its impacts on the Verde River from population growth. Next. So in the middle Verde, we also have to look at pumping in the middle Verde. It's not just an issue for Prescott Valley. But as I mentioned to you, the decline in the river continues all along the length of the river, decline in flow. And so this is a graphic produced by Salt River Project of wells in 1950. The next slide, 2015.
Holy cow.
And this doesn't even show 2022, right? This is just since 2015. So you can see the growth in those 65 years. And the river obviously is not this wide. This is a distorted image that reflects more floodplain than actual river. So those people aren't sinking their wells into the river. On the other hand, there's this thing called an adjudication. And that is a process, a legal process whereby a judge is attempting to work with the parties, the folks that have sued the people and the people that are using water. The folks that have sued are, of course, Salt River Project. And what they're trying to do is assert who has rights to take water out of the river. Now, in Arizona, surface water and groundwater are considered to be two separate legal entities. And we know that's a fiction. We know that surface water and groundwater are the same thing. Just one is above ground, and one is below ground. And so in trying to figure out whether someone is taking water from the river, you could look at whether they have a ditch. And there's some 60 or so ditches along the river from people that have legally, since they first came to this country or this state, been taking water from the river through a ditch. But there's also all these wells. And how many of those wells are so close to the river that they could be considered legally to be taking water from the river? And that's the big question of the adjudication. And one of the reasons why this has been going on since 1974. Yeah, so hopefully within our lifetimes, maybe the younger folks, they're your lifetime, not even sure it'll be in my lifetime, they'll settle this adjudication and decide who actually has rights to the river. But it's gotten to the point where it's pretty critical to settle these issues. We can't keep taking water from the river. All right, so how do you save a river? That's what I want to focus the rest of this talk on, is what we've learned from the watershed report card and how we're applying what we've learned. So coming together is a beginning, keeping together is progress, working together is success. Collaboration is in our mission. We all know that we can only get things done if we all work together. So I like this quote. So here's the watershed report card as it came out in 2020, and I've given you a copy of the watershed report card. It's in the back, and our update. We did a partial update in 2022. We'll do a full update in 2025. But we talked to a bunch of people, right? The only way to do these sorts of things is talk to people and find out what do they value. And based on what they value, what would they, what do we stand to lose? What are we at risk of losing of what we value? And then how do we measure that? And not only how do we measure that, then how do we decide what are our thresholds? You know, if we're going to give something a grade, what's an A, what's a B, what's a C, and so on. So we went after all those questions by working with a number of people, some centered in the Verde Valley, some down in Phoenix. Not sure if we actually came over to Prescott exclusively, but I know there was some work done in the upper Verde, also with some folks doing focus groups and the like. And then we worked with that had data, right? We're a small organization, about 12 staff. 12 paid staff. We're a small organization. We don't have the budget to collect data. And besides, what would it mean if we collected all the data, right? We want to go to trusted sources. We want to go to established sources. So we were looking for data that would, or information, I should say. Let me start with information. Let's step up even from data. We were looking for information that would apply to the entire watershed, A, and then B, there was already data that could speak to that information. So in some way we were constrained. Some people wanted one of our metrics to be boaters in the river. Well, that only works if you're in the middle of Verde, where we have boaters in the river, right? So we couldn't use them. We'd still have some metrics that didn't work for the entire watershed, but that we thought were important for other reasons and that we did use. All right, so we grouped the metrics to water habitat communities based on the feedback we got, and then water quality, quantity management, habitat, upland, riparian, aquatic, communities, recreation, engagement, vitality. And I've had people say, why are you talking about these? Healthy communities and healthy rivers together, right? You don't have healthy communities, you don't have healthy rivers. And of course, we also think that recreation is an important part of that, and we put that in our communities. And somebody said, why do you care about affordable housing? Again, we want to have healthy communities, so we wanted to understand is
Microphone without a bar.
that got a fairly low score here, that got a C. But altogether, when you added up all the scores, it was.
I did find in the email, he said you would be entering muted.
One more thing before you go off. It's also, we scored of 7 areas, 7 subregions in the watershed. And so each one of them got their own score. And then in you can look at
Text about sustainability and
for
we're just
this on the region. What the
curious about it.
So you can also look at each of those scores.
It's irritating to have the breaking transmission.
So what kind of solutions we wanted to come up with, what kind of solutions we wanted to put together. There was one that rose to the top that we developed during the COVID times, when we could do everything by Zoom. And that was a new brand and a new program we called River Friendly Living. And River Friendly Living inspires a culture of voluntary river conservation. So we are certifying homes, we're certifying businesses, and within businesses, we're certifying farms, ranches, and developments. And so we developed this in order to give people an understanding of what it would mean to be river friendly. So in 4 areas: sustainable water, clean water, healthy habitat, and supportive communities. So each one of those has their own metrics, their own scores, and with your own home, you can even self-certify. We'll have our website up in January. Right now, we're using paper applications, but in January, when our new website launches, you'll be able to just go on the website and click and decide whether your home is bronze, silver, gold, and get certified. With businesses, we actually have to go and talk to the businesses to determine if they meet these requirements. But right now, we're mostly doing it in the Verde Valley. We'd like to explore it and expand it to the entire watershed. All right, so let's talk about some of those, each of those different areas. Is the water flowing? And I showed you this before, so we can go on to the next one. One of our solutions, Verde River Exchange, we've actually been doing since 2016. It's a program that connects people with water rights to people who are using water. And so people who, I'm not sure if my next slide says anything. Yes, there we go. How does it work? Water suppliers are people who have water rights who forego the use of that water. Usually we've never done anything longer than a 1-year contract. So if they want to fallow a field, or if they want to switch to a different crop that uses less water. We had somebody say, somebody who had a big, an acre of Bermuda grass they were watering. He said, I let the Bermuda grass die this year. And so we entered into a contract with them for the amount of water, the 1 acre foot, let's say, that they had the right to water that field with. And then we took that acre foot of water and we divided it up into water offset credits. And we used to only do water offset credits in 1 acre foot increments, but now we're breaking them down into much smaller increments so we can sell to more people. But when I say sell, again, we're selling a water offset credit. We're not selling water. So that water that is in the water in the Verde River Exchange is flowing in the river. And the way we pay for the program is by those folks that buy those water offset credits. They buy the water offset credits. We use that money to pay the folks that are foregoing the use of their water, because water does have a value and we pay them money. And the red shows, but this was an article from 2019 in the Republic, Arizona Republic, and at the time, the water program had kept almost 10 million gallons, up to 37 million gallons that's been kept in the river over time. So that's one example. Let's talk about clean water. You know, for birds and for river otters who live in that water every day. These are our scores for water quality, and we found some really interesting stuff here. Overall, water quality was good. That was because, and this data came from the Department of Environmental Quality. Macroinvertebrates, little critters that live in the water, and they're like filter feeders and they're predators, and those bugs and critters, are they healthy? Turbidity and how cloudy is the water? This actually is one that we were just looking at near the dams in the lower Verde. Water quality index and then water quality certainty. You notice something really odd. One of them is really good and the other one is really, really bad. So that immediately says, well, here's something we need to fix, right? What we know is that when we take water quality samples in the Verde, in general, the water quality is good. Why is water quality certainly red? Because there aren't enough people taking samples often enough. So if I take a sample in one place in the river 1 year, and then I go back to that same place the next year, does that tell me anything about the water quality over time? No. All it does is tells me that on May 1st of 1 year and on May 1st of the next year, the water was good. But it doesn't tell me about during the summer when the flow is low, when we expect to see poor water quality. And so what we're doing, next slide might say something. So we started, so the DEQ has a program called Arizona Water Watchers. And so we have a Verde Water Watchers. We're trying to get folks, all the folks together that are focusing on water quality sampling and get them to some meetings. And let's go to the next slide. And get to them to some meetings and put together a water quality sampling plan for the entire Verde, working with DEQ. But we also got some funding to do some sampling in Lower Oak Creek. So we have some volunteers that have taken about, 40, as of June, as of the end of June of this year, they've taken 40 water quality samples. So we're focusing on, when are people in the water? When are a lot of people in the water? And is water quality worse before holiday weekend or after a holiday weekend? So trying to answer those kinds of questions by going back to the same places over and over and over again. And then we also started a hashtag, a social media promotion, which I know you guys have done a whole lot of Prescott Creeks with taking trash out of the river and out of places where the trash can flow into the river. This was something we did during COVID because we couldn't go out en masse with people. So we said, take a picture, post it on Facebook or Instagram with this hashtag so we can keep track of how much water, how much trash has been taken out of the river. All right, so let's talk about the ecosystem, the landscape ecosystem. This is the land side of the ecosystem, the habitat side. So again, upland did not do very well. We used Forest Service's Upland Habitat Condition Index. For riparian, we used birds. I'm not real satisfied with that indicator. I think there's a better set of indicators, metrics we could probably come up with, but we didn't use that. And then fish, aquatic fish, that was from Fish and Game, and is reflective of desirable and undesirable fish in the river, and that scored moderate. So one of the things when we saw these scores, after the Forest Service, in particular about the upland habitat condition scores, is they pointed to these erosion gullies, which I kind of started my talk talking about, how they damage. The erosion gullies remove topsoil. That means plants can't grow there. That means animals can't feed because plants nourish the animals. They make it difficult to walk around in the landscape, whether you're a pronghorn or a human or a wild horse. And the water in the water table cannot be any higher than the bottom of the gully. So no matter where the water table, I mean, this is classic, right? If you want to drain a wetland, you dig a ditch. If you want to lower the water table, dig a ditch. The water cannot be any higher than the bottom of that ditch. And so go to, this is the start, then one of the things we do, you put in one rock dams and pour over ramps and swimming pools, and this is what it looked like a year later. So it slowed the water down, caused some of that topsoil to get captured, and allowed some plants to grow. But you have to keep doing this, you have to keep going back over and over and over again. And it feels kind of silly sometimes that we get money to hire guys to put rocks on the land. But hey, it works. So that's what we've been doing, starting a couple of years ago. But something we've been doing a lot longer than that is restoring riparian forests. So this is one of our least, oh, gotta go back. This is one of our least favorite riverside inhabitants, a giant reed or a which forms an impenetrable thicket, and you don't even know there's a river there, you can't get to it. And if you can't get to it, you know for darn sure no other animal can get to it, deer can't get to it. And that was the guy with his before picture and then the after picture. You know, wow, look, there were trees there. And next, and then a year later, you can see, now you can see the river. You couldn't even see the river, but now you can see it there. So we do this, typically we have, we keep track of it year over year. And we have a cycle where right now we're in the treatment cycle. We have folks out in the wildlands, removing invasive, and then in the springtime, we have a smaller crew that comes and does monitoring, looks at regrowth, and does this picture. So we have picture techniques now to keep track of it. So ultimately, I'd like our riparian metrics to include this kind of data. Also, in addition to looking at birds, because let me just ask you actually, if there has historically been, let's say, 200 breeding bird species found, and then we look and 2 of those species no longer occur, is that a good score? An excellent score? A bad score? How do we set that metric for what level of species loss lowers a grade? So that was one of the questions we were trying to do with it. I said we're going to do a full-on reevaluation in 2025, and I'd like to spend some time talking with different Audubon groups and different folks who think about these things, and ask you guys to look at the data, and you guys can tell us what you're seeing, because we downloaded eBird data, best data set there is, right? And tried to make sense of it as far as the riparian habitat. But I mean, the good news is it's still pretty darn good, and I think that's because we've been working at it for so long and improving the habitat. All right, so Sharon told me about a project that's going on in the Upper Verde with stormwater management. So let's talk about stormwater management a little bit. I'm going to talk about some projects that Friends of the Verde River did. The Nature Conservancy is also doing projects in the Upper Verde. We found this building that was just a building in downtown Camp Verde, and it was a tilt-up building, and it had been vacant for a really long time. And a company came in and said, well, we'd like to make this our regional training center for title folks, title and escrow company. And so we worked with them on that. We looked at the plot plan and we hired an engineer. So if you look at this, if you know anything about plot plans, what this means is this is steep over here, right? So next slide. So what this is telling us is that as water comes off of the roof and off of the parking lot, it's going to go in that direction. Next slide. And where's that going to go? There's the river. So what water has been doing from this big parking lot and this building has just been flowing off and going down to the river. So as it's doing that, it's taking oil and grease, it's taking trash, it's taking sediment, and it might be eroding those homes too, right? So there's a lot of negatives that are happening when water is flowing like that across a landscape. So next slide. So we hired an engineer. They came up with the most cost-effective solution, which was to put in 3 basins. There's 2 here and then another one downslope, this big one downslope, and it's designed to capture 300,000 gallons a year. That's based on the design storm. If it rains more, it'll capture more. If it rains less, it'll capture less. and keeps the river clean and protects downstream neighborhoods. So there's a lot of benefits from doing these kinds of projects. So we've started doing more of them. Next slide. So this was a little one. I didn't put the photo in here of where they are situated, but this is a little tiny camp resort in Cottonwood that sits right on the blowout wash, or right on a ditch that goes into the blowout wash in Cottonwood, and the blowout wash goes into the river. So it's perfectly situated. If we can keep more water on that site, then we can, again, prevent more of that erosion and flooding and trash and all that stuff getting into the river. So we worked with the owner. He got silver certified. He's got a gray water and a rainwater capture system, and has all these benefits. And he's also educating the people that come there. He is renting it out. Now this is it's like what do you call it? It's not an Airbnb because he's renting directly, but it's that. Anyway, so he's got visitors coming here and he's educating them about what they're doing. We're going to continue working about other ways we can educate visitors to the Verde Valley about how they can save the river too. So the next slide is the big one that we're working on now. This site was pointed out to us at the corner. It's at the corner that high school is on, and I don't have a really good photo of this to show you, but the high school has a lot of big flat roofs, as you can imagine high schools do. It's got some big parking lots, and at the intersection, the corner of Fur and Camino Real, there's a lot of erosion. And the city of Cottonwood had identified that it's number 5 on their drainage plan, on their priority list for the drainage plan. So we have a design, and it has now been funded for building. We're going to either have it, I think we have it out for RFP for, we have the RFP out, and we will be awarding contracts soon to get this done. It's going to use to slow the water down. There's going to be an educational component that high school students can learn from and work with this project. And it's going to solve the number 5 priority on the Cottonwood Drainage Master Plan, which I think is really cool. And it's with the Prescott that every city has to have one. They all have a drainage master plan. So what are the opportunities for solving some of those problems and getting multiple benefits, not just solving, say, erosion by itself, but putting more water into the ground, educating kids. Some of these projects can also be combined with trails, bird watching areas. So there's lots of things you can do with stormwater capture. All right, so what part do homes play? I got a home, what can I do? Can I be part of this solution? Of course. So again, just to remind you, the connection between groundwater and surface water, the next slide, is that the water in the groundwater goes right into that river. So next. So what can I do as a homeowner? I can collect water from my roof, and I can use that water to water my lawn in times when it needs it, when it's not raining, and that helps with erosion and helps put water back into the ground, water that would otherwise just flow right off maybe into the river. And so another thing, just little berms on your property can slow water down. It's very simple, just a couple of inches high. Next slide. And then can developments be part of the solution? So this is a project that I did in my prior organization in Los Angeles, and we wanted to reimagine the streets as recharge facilities. And the great thing about this is a street that flooded a lot. And this is also a street that, as you can imagine, was in really bad shape, because when the street floods, it also erodes asphalt. So it was on the schedule for the city of Los Angeles to tear up and redo the street. So we said, great, tear up the street and dig basically a ditch down the middle of the street, next slide, and put in these recharge, next one, put in these great big infiltration galleries underneath the river, underneath the street, sorry, it's river, now it's a street. And so this street has these infiltration galleries, they've got catch basins, so looks like your typical street with a stormwater, storm drain system, but it's a storm drain system that goes nowhere. It goes right back into the aquifer, and this is drinking water for the city of Los Angeles. or putting water back into their drinking water system. And then each house, this was with some money we had to do private property work. Each house also got Parkway bioswales. So there was some beautification. Next. So I'm moving pretty fast here. So that helps our community. And so that's one of the things, even though even that sort of thing is not on this ring as something that we can track with metrics, like we don't have a metric for storm infiltration. That is something that we can do to improve communities, is to help them when they've got a street that has problems with flooding. So more things that we can do about bringing people together. We do MLK Day of Service events. I think you guys do too. Yes, yes, of course. Next. We started a program during COVID. We thought we were going to have a lecture series, you know, just bring everybody in once a month and we'll have a talk. And then COVID hit, we couldn't do that. So actually this picture doesn't, I had to put people in this picture, but this picture is from May of 2022. We've done the first 2 seasons of Verde are 100% virtual, in the sense that we interview people, those interviews on Yamapai Broadcasting's cable channel. We archive them on our website, and we've actually gotten a lot of people to give us their email for exclusive content. So we say that you can go to our YouTube channel and see them without signing up. I didn't say that to the microphone, but we'll ask people to sign up for the exclusive content, and thus we capture their emails and we can send them more information in that way. And then they get to see the videos maybe before we tell everybody else that they're out there. But anyway, it worked out really well, and we're working on season 3 now. Yeah, so we talked about the Birding Festival. I don't need to say much about that, except the dates, if you haven't already got these on your calendar, April 27th to 30th. It's gonna be fun. And then something else that we started planning this during COVID, implementing it after we could bring children together, is something we call a bio blitz. And does anyone here not have a smartphone? We'll give you a tablet. You can have a tablet. But see the kid with the tablet, he doesn't have a smartphone either. How many of you use iNaturalist? Okay, so you all should use iNaturalist. Download the app to your phone and then go in projects and sign up for the Verde Valley Bio Blitz. We do one each year, so you have to sign up each year for it. And during a 2-week period in April, anything that you, any photo that you take and that you put into iNaturalist then becomes part of our data set for the Bio Blitz. So it's great for adults, right? But what we really want to do is this is one of those gateway drugs. We want to get kids out in nature. We want to get them excited. And the reports are that these kids are very excited. Can I do this by myself? Can I do this all the time? Can I do this anytime? Do I have to be, no, you can do this anytime. Just go take a photo, put it in iNaturalist. Putting it in iNaturalist, of course, makes it part of the scientific data set. The other really big community science, global community science project is iNaturalist. A lot younger than eBird, but it's growing. Kids, sometimes we don't want kids' data to be in a publicly accessible database. And so there are others, there's like Seek. Seek is practically the same folks, but it does not collect data on the individual, and you can use that to find out what something, you know, what a plant is or what an animal is. So for kids, again, we use our own iPads, so they're not locating their own data. And we record their observations. I don't think I wrote the numbers down here, but we had something like 420 observers, and there were something like 4,000 observations of over 1,000 unique species. And anyone want to take a guess at what the #1 living thing is that was photographed and uploaded more than anything else in the Verde watershed?
Dogs.
Lizards, dogs, anybody else? Karen, anybody else? I mean, none of you are even any close. This is Saguaro. We have saguaros in the Verde watershed. Who knew? Okay, but the second most photographed was an animal, and I'll give you a hint, it was a bird. What do you think it was?
River.
Yes. They're really easy to photograph. and they're Very easy.
What did they say?
I'm not sure.
All right, so let's talk about Upper Verde.
The river.
I would talk a little bit about this at the end of my talk. There is, if you haven't heard yet, there is an effort to, I think next slide, to advocate for the designation of the Upper Verde and Sycamore Canyon. So all, I think down, well, basically down to Clarkdale. Designate, get federal recognition for it as a wild and scenic river. And that activity is right now. You can sign up. The next slide. Here's the website, wildverderiver.org. And they are getting supporters and folks, businesses. Jay, I mean, Eric, I don't know if Jay's Bird Farm is on that support list, but you should look and see if you want to sign up. And not to call you out or anything. But Prescott Audubon could be a supporter, and individuals, and some of you may have businesses that you're associated with, like Prescott Creek might want to sign up. Anyway, do get involved, and if you get on the list, if you sign up and get on the list, then you'll be on the list when they need support. And when they need you to talk to, they want to wait until after the election, basically before they start getting a sponsor for a bill or sponsors for a bill. We already have support from our senators and from Congressman O'Halloran, who we don't know if he'll be reelected. So we'll get it going, we'll get it done. I'm confident. And then actually, if you go back one, yeah, that's this one.
Okay.
So just to know, all of the tributaries to the Verde are eligible for wild and scenic designation. And so wouldn't it be cool if we could get them all designated? The trick is that they can't have a diversion or a dam on them. And so a lot of Oak Creek doesn't qualify because it has some diversions on it, but a lot of Oak Creek does. And then the same thing with Wet Beaver, West Clear Creek. I'm not sure whether, I think East Verde does. I don't know about if Granite, if any part of Granite is listed, I'm not sure. But there's a map in there you can go to, and it shows you which rivers have been designated as eligible. The Middle Verde is not those many diversions, ditch diversions on it, unfortunately. All right, there we go. Here we are. We're doing it for these folks. We're doing it for these folks, right? Nope.
Not too fast.
Kids and old folks. All of us who love the river. There we go. Now I've got it. Thank you very much.
VerdeRiver.org.
And who was that?
Nancy Steele, Director of.
Maybe these photographs here from Coral.
That could be.
I'm happy to take questions. Or entertain motion to adjourn. Whichever is your pleasure. And does anyone on Zoom have a question? So let's not forget about them. Sharon.
If they have any questions, I'll let you know.
Okay.
I thought it'd be interesting. I saw this little tiny announcement of something really important. And it's the Upper Verde River Coalition to identify a recharge project with a grant, $150,000 from the Neighbors Service. That's us.
Right.
And very exciting because it'll be flood control mitigation. It can be projects for neighborhoods, for various areas, and it involves rainwater harvesting so that that water can become part of the groundwater, which then becomes part of drinking water.
Right. So if you know places where there's erosion happening, where you see flooding, where you see water hanging around too long in a grocery store parking lot, Those are all game for these kinds of projects. I think that I answered all of your questions.
Very good presentation.
Again.
I have a question. My biggest concern with, many communities that are being built today are being required to put some type of holdup for the rainwater, but it's not meant to store it. It's meant to just stop it from eroding too much. And then they've talked about the stormwater retention. I'm assuming a component of that must be percolation determination. Not every location that we have in our obviously large area is a candidate for that kind of thing. Is that part of and parcel to what the studies do and decide where they're going to do those things?
Yeah, there's a few things that are going on there. One is, I thought Phoenix was really, out there doing great stuff because I saw all these big basins. And then I found out that they're connected to storm drains. So first of all, make sure they're not connected to storm drains.
Right.
That they might be percolating. A lot of times cities really just want to move the water out fast because of mosquitoes.
Right.
So we don't want to have mosquitoes. So we do percolation tests before we do these projects to determine how fast the water is going to percolate into the ground. And then you want to design the project so that it percolates fast enough so that it's not sitting around growing mosquitoes. That's your main consideration. Yeah, so when you do those projects. But let's say you've got a project where it's not really very good. The percolation is not very good. You can put in dry wells.
Okay.
You can punch holes. You just have to be careful. There are EPA rules if you're like wastewater treatment plants can't put wastewater on the ground to soak in, or they can't inject wastewater. It has to be treated to a certain standard or else they're violating clean water. We don't want to contaminate our aquifers.
That's right.
But soils do a really, really remarkable job. And microbes in soils do a really remarkable job of cleaning up. Before we did that project that I showed you in Los Angeles, and that I talked about in Los Angeles, we did a 5-year study looking at water quality at the surface in the soil water region where the water is, as it's moving through the soil. And then we had test wells, and we had the wells were everywhere from 10 feet deep to over 200 feet deep. And the projects were everything from a home to a materials recycling facility, to a regular recycling facility, just a paper recycling facility, all kinds of industrial sites and homes. And at every site, the soil microbes cleaned up the water before it got to the groundwater. We saw no impacts at all because of the way these were all structured. So you can do it, you can make it work. It is safe and healthy.
Have you found that tribal entities or environmental departments, specifically, for example, Fort McDowell Plantation and the stretch of river that flows through there, are they generally cooperative with efforts for the Verde, or is there special challenges that in terms of the water quality testing and ongoing data collection and things like that, just access in general?
Right. We've mostly been working with the Yavapai Apache Nation, so we haven't yet. We just started making introductions down with Fort McDowell Yavapai. But the Yavapai Apache Nation has had sort of good starts on this. Their environmental quality department has a lot of issues they're dealing with. And it's a continuous process of working with that relationship. So I can't say we've made a huge amount of progress, but on the other hand, they're doing a lot on their side. For example, they've had their wastewater treatment system. Their wastewater treatment plant has gotten some recent infusions of money so that they can have cleaner wastewater and they can start using that water. If you recycle it to a certain level, you can use it to water things like grass in parks or cemeteries or certain places where you don't need to use potable water, for example, to water. And so they're upgrading their wastewater treatment system so that they can do that. We're doing that. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes.
Bird on the first slide.
You
Bird.
tell me. What was it?
I don't know what kind of bird that was.
I couldn't tell. It looked like a warbler, but I couldn't tell.
Yeah, well, I can't tell you either. I'm really embarrassed. I should produce it for you guys. I realized, I was telling Paul earlier, I realized after I looked at the slide that, oh gosh, I forgot to write down where I got that photo from, which was like, I have to do a search to find it again and then track back to who gave me that slide, that
Do you have
photo.
an opinion, Walt? No, I didn't. Yeah, I was studying it and I honestly couldn't come up with an idea.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
I'd like to work it again.
Yeah, some more.
Some kind of work.
Yeah.
All right,
Okay.
all right, sorry.
That's all right.
Don't come to a birding group unless you know all the birds. Don't you take it. All right, thank you all very much. You know, it